How's it going, Star Seekers? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Luke, and in today's review we're going to be checking out The Future You've Been Dreaming Of on the Nintendo Switch. And it's an unusual visual novel come life simulation game where you get to play as a god, and with your godly powers, direct a young girl through a troubling period of her life. Now I've got to be honest, this game wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be, so let's have a butcher's at what it has to offer, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content and want to see more. So the story in The Future You've Been Dreaming Of follows a young college student called Sachi Usui, who after being forced to leave her current residence due to its imminent demolition, finds herself in a suspiciously cheap apartment which she's told is also occupied by a resident god, which of course is you. Now, throughout the game you'll follow her trials and tribulations as she takes her first step into adulthood, attempting to find employment and her way in life, and the story itself is relatively short but enjoyable enough. Due to Sachi's innocence and naivete, at times it can actually be quite sweet and somewhat amusing, as there are elements that I'm sure many people can relate to. But from what I can tell, the narration doesn't change between playthroughs and isn't influenced by your actions, so after your first playthrough you'll likely just end up skipping through everything apart from the endings, of which there are 20 in the game. Now, being as this is part graphic novel and intended for multiple playthroughs, I did find it a bit odd and frankly a little disappointing that there aren't alternative paths for you to discover, as in most graphic novels, these are what provides the incentive for replaying the game, and to be honest, it really wouldn't have taken much to just add a few alternative lines of text. If however you're a fan of these type of games or are just in it for the cute anime girl, then you probably won't mind it too much, at least not in your first few playthroughs. Now, gameplay wise, I was just expecting another lewd title with shallow gameplay mechanics and a focus on getting an eye full of anime titties, but rather surprisingly it's not quite as pervy as I'd anticipated, and the game is essentially a life sim where you get to influence the actions of its young protagonist. The game's intro explains that you're a god, but rather than being all powerful and having the ability to bend the will of this puny human, the length of your abilities extends to being able to ring a bell, though for whatever reason this proves to be just as effective. Now, the game is comprised of 10 separate chapters, and between the narrative story elements, which are delivered via text with Japanese voiceovers, you're tasked with manipulating Sachi into performing different actions, and you're able to move freely about the room, targeting various objects of interest, before giving your bell a bit of a dingling with the tap of an A button to draw Sachi's attention towards them. The objective in The Future You've Been Dreaming Of though is to improve Sachi's attributes by getting her to interact with different objects, though in each chapter you'll have a limited amount of time in which to do so. Each of these interactions will add or remove points from specific attributes, which for the most part make sense. Doing exercises, for instance, will improve your endurance, while reading a book or studying will improve your knowledge. But there are some that don't really make sense, like why would eating a banana increase your femininity? On second thoughts, let's just leave that be. Anyway, the point is that in order to obtain each one of the game's endings, you must finish the 10th chapter of the game with each attribute sitting between specific ranges, and one of the aspects of the game which adds a little bit of challenge is remembering which stats certain items affect. In addition to the stat criteria, throughout your playthrough you must collect notes scattered about the place, which sort of provide hints about the endings but really don't offer much in the way of help. Now initially you'll only have a few different objects to interact with, but as the game goes on new objects and features are introduced, giving you multiple options for improving attributes, and occasionally just to keep things interesting you'll get a special cutscene for the interactions, which can be rather amusing and sometimes have just a little hint of perv to them. As your powers grow and the bond between you and Sachi becomes stronger, you do gain the ability to actually touch her, which, rather than turn her on, appears to just freak her out. You also gain access to some signature poses, which I presume make Sachi perform certain poses, though to be honest I still have no idea how these work. Now each playthrough of the game will take you around 45 minutes or so, and as I said, in each of the 10 chapters you get a time limit in which to perform your desired actions, and in the beginning you'll feel like you have to use every second of this and maximise your efficiency, but for the majority of the endings I found that this amount of time really isn't required, and I often found myself just sitting idle waiting for the timer to count down. Your reward for completing the game and discovering new endings include the unlocking of additional objects for you to play with around the apartment, as well as new costume and underwear options to dress Sachi up in, and art pieces in the gallery, and these are essentially the only thing providing the incentive for repeat playthroughs. One thing the game doesn't mention though, and a thing which I didn't realise on my first playthrough, is that if you don't collect all of the notes relevant for the particular ending you're going for, it won't actually unlock when you complete the 10th chapter. The problem here is that notes only appear in specific chapters, and they don't continue through playthroughs, so if you miss them you're basically screwed. Overall though, I'd say that gameplay in this one is adequate at best. While it does offer a little bit of challenge, balancing your attributes and ensuring you collect the right notes, there's really very little depth to it, and after your first couple of playthroughs things just become a little bit repetitive. I think that had there been branching story paths for you to explore and perhaps more locations for you to visit, it would have really kept things a little more interesting and worth the effort to experience them. But as it is, gameplay variety is just not there with this one. You'll soon find yourself repeating the same tasks over and over in every chapter just to hit those attribute markers, and while the odd quick time events with them make things a little bit more interesting, once you've seen them, you've seen them. When all's said and done though, if you're looking for a game where you really don't have to think about much and enjoy watching a cute anime girl wander about a room, play with a massage toy in the proper manner, and ride rodeo machines like nobody's business, then the future you've been dreaming of may be for you. If however you're looking for something with a decent amount of depth and complexity, or just another loot tile, then I'd advise giving this one a miss. So on the visual front, I personally thought that The Future You've Been Dreaming Of was a reasonably decent looking game. The apartment environment has a good amount of detail to it, Sachi herself doesn't look too bad, and the textures in the game are of reasonable quality, so things don't look too blurry or low res. When it comes to audio, sound effects are minimal and the Japanese voiceovers are alright, but again they get a little bit too repetitive. And the game's soundtrack has a happy, quirky feel to it, which fits perfectly with the gameplay and reflects Sachi's happy-go-lucky attitude. Overall though, not bad stuff on the audio and visual front. So when it comes to the game's performance on the Switch, there are some noticeable frame rate dips, especially when moving around the apartment, but for the most part they don't really have much of an impact on gameplay. Issues wise, I've already mentioned the repetitive nature of the game and the fact that there didn't appear to be any discernible deviations in the storyline apart from the endings, but aside from this, there's no way to actually cancel off bell actions, so if you accidentally select one whilst trying to interact with Sachi, then there's no way to actually stop her from performing it. If you queue up two identical actions, you've also got to wait for her to complete one, fully exit it, and then re-enter it to perform it again, which just feels unnatural and time consuming. And finally, possibly my biggest criticism, is that the notes that you have to find give no indication as to which ending they link to until you pick them up, so unless you memorise every note in every chapter, you'll end up spending a lot of your time just picking them up in each and every run. When all's said and done though, The Future You've Been Dreaming Of is not a terrible game, it's just not a very interesting one. The game did have a lot of potential. Like I said, there could have been branching paths and there could have been plenty more depth to its mechanics and interactions, but as it is, it's very simplistic and very repetitive, and when it comes to my own personal rating, I'm going to be giving The Future You've Been Dreaming Of 2 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for something to chill to without anything complicated to tax your brain with, then you might consider picking this one up, but don't expect too much from it, and if you're just in it for the loot, then I suggest looking elsewhere. And so that about does it for this review of the future you've been dreaming of on the Nintendo Switch. As always, if it helped you out, make sure to hit that like button, let me know your thoughts and opinions on it down in the comments section below, and if you watch my content regularly but are not yet subscribed, then please consider doing so. For now though, as always, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.